what advice could you give to me if I'm like sort of in a place of despair or hopelessness? Because it's very hard from that place to actually be a good person on a date or a good boyfriend or a good partner.
You don't have to actually be good. You don't even have to be okay. You just have to do whatever is needed to do better than yesterday. Your only competition is yourself from yesterday. You want to step it up from where they were. In terms of your own strength, your own discipline, your own awareness of yourself, your ability to listen, your ability to be aware of what your emotional state's at and how it's filtering what you're experiencing for you. The better you get, the better your experience will be, because most of your experience is based on how you're processing. My name is Ty, short for Taliesin. I'm 39 years old. I've been married for about 4 years now, in a relationship with that amazing person for about, since like 2016, 2017. Been pretty much dating somebody or multiple people continuously since I started dating seriously when I was 20. But before that, I was actually a virgin until around my 20th birthday. And at the time, I considered that very frustrating and wondered if I would ever end up in the type of position I'm at now. But straight off the cuff, I'd say instead of worrying about that, I just got good at some really cool shit and then made an interesting life for myself, and interesting, beautiful women were always around. I'm lucky to say. Even if I didn't always make the best relationships. Kept learning from them, kept getting better.
Yeah. Okay. So you really focused on yourself, you specialized in something in your life, and then there were always interesting, attractive women around who then were drawn to your skill.
Rumi said this line, the goal is not to go out and find love somewhere. It's to find and destroy all the barriers within yourself that prevent you from finding it.
So basically, Rumi was saying that
You want a good relationship, go worry yourself, bro. Straight up.
start with yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's dive right into that then. So I'm 27 years old. I've never been on a date, but I still have to put myself out there.
Most lives of diversity, integrity, and quality include some amount of community service, some amount of going out and being involved in some extra hobby or craft where you make something interesting or challenge some type of established idea in your craft. You know, this is how you meet other interesting people that are into the same shit as you. And that expands your pool of just general friends. And that's going to, generally get you even more out there. Even for introverts. I've been an introvert about, honestly, half the time. I'm about whatever neurodivergence I have, it includes me being able to sometimes tune out the fact that I'm performing in front of an audience or in a big group, and other times to be just as socially anxious of it as anybody else. It's a matter of where one's focus lies.
Right. So focusing on the right things then. So could you share the story of your first sort of date or your first engagement with some sort of romantic relationship?
First one I was aware of at the time, because that's the thing. Early on, there was a lot of experiences where people were giving me signals and I was just not picking them up. This is another thing about being neurodivergent. Sometimes, in a conversation, there can be the text, the context, and the subtext.
Wow.
And for a lot of
layers.
neurodivergent types, we're listening to the text.
Right.
A literalist, right? That's how I was.
Yes.
A literalist that like Legos, math, and hard logic analytical stuff. So of course I was going to miss out on everything girls were trying to drop for me between 14 and 17. I had no idea. I'd be hanging out with two girls that I was in a dance group with on the subway, and another girl will be flirting with me and asking to braid my hair because I am generally always at long curly hair, because generally the girls have always liked long curly hair, so
Is that why you had it, or was it just
Fuck
because of the
no,
way you
but
were
it was
raised? Yeah,
convenient, you know.
it was convenient.
It
Yeah,
was
yeah,
it
I
was
understand.
it was working. It was working against my natural tendency to not know how to approach people. How about that?
Hmm.
As a homeschooled kid, on top of being neurodivergent, shit, I needed all the help I could get.
It attracted people to you.
Anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
like this girl's like, let me braid your hair. Here's my phone number, and I did not realize or was not going to remember even that exchange unless those other two girls I was with pointed out to me after the fact that that girl was flirting with me.
Right.
Right? Like that's how oblivious I was starting off.
Hmm.
And it only got better slowly over decades.
Hmm.
Right? So like when you ask, oh, what was my first date? What was my first date that I was aware of? It was a date. Um, there was a girl that she had actually managed to make it obvious enough to me that she liked me. And then her mom moved them to Kentucky.
Wow.
And so I went to visit them the
Hmm.
week of the Valentine's Day after they moved, I think, in the fall. And I went and visited them in the spring or something like that. Took the bus down. I lost my bags on the way back, and I lost my wallet while I was there. And it was a bit of a disaster of a trip, but it was my first kiss and my first intently romantic social engagement that I actually knew at the time was itself romantic. And I remembered it as really cute. And later we talked about it on Facebook after reconnecting, and she remembered it as, you know, mixed to disappointing because I wasn't communicating stuff and wasn't even accepting compliments and, you know, was in fact at least half as non-communicative as it turns out by proof I still sometimes am. Even though in my head I was, you know, totally with her on the whole, oh yeah, this is cute. This is us, the 16-year-olds having our first kiss, going for walks in the woods, just, you know, talking about life. We were reading the same Hemingway book. That's how nerdy this relationship was. It was so adorable. Absolutely wholesome.
How old were you at this time?
16.
16.
First
Okay.
kiss.
Hmm.
Bang.
That's awesome. I haven't even had my first kiss.
You'll get there, man. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I know. It's just interesting to consider that because I go through a lot of what your 16-year-old self went through. I have trouble accepting compliments. I take things literally. I have a really hard time reading subtext accurately. Like I'll get it wrong often, and I
Yeah.
prefer to just read the text because that's much easier to get right
That's not
and
even how
be consistent.
the whole chunks of our society don't even communicate on that level. All the actual shit they're trying to communicate is like through subtext.
Hmm.
It's terrible. But it's also like how we get certain types of poetry and shit, so I guess I have to be okay with it.
So from 16-year-old Ty to about 35-year-old Ty, what were the cool skills that you developed so deeply that you began to attract women more so? It sounds like you've always been attractive to women as well.
That might have been true, though I was completely unaware of it. You can be in the
Mm.
pretty bubble and the autism bubble and be unaware of both.
Mm-hmm.
I think that
At
might have been me for a while.
at what point did you realize you were attractive to women?
I want to say my early 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And and it was not because I had more evidence around that time. It was because I had finally started to do enough meditation and self-analysis work to start becoming aware of all the signals I was missing and all of the parts of the conversation I wasn't hearing and all of the
Mm-hmm.
ways I wasn't communicating and wasn't connecting well, and
Mm-hmm.
started working on like what I could have done better. And then I started hearing all these and remembering all these, oh shit, opportunities I missed
Mm-hmm.
to do better, or even, you know, have a whole nother one I didn't think was an option but was. You know? So many things might have happened. Can't think about the multiverses, you know, you'll go nuts. That's why
Right.
those Marvel movies are falling apart right now.
All the branching possibilities.
It's useless. It's
Right.
intellectual masturbation to think about such things. You gotta work on what was, what is, what can be.
Right. The only point of reliving the past is to
Do
make
better.
the present and future better.
Yeah. exactly.
because that is in our control.
We,
Yeah. Or
yeah.
at least not control, but influence, let's say.
And you and I have both
Right.
talked about, concepts tangential to stoicism, as long as I'm not
Right.
too toxic and hard on the self, can actually be very useful here. The idea, like a good Buddhist, is to, when your remembrance exchanges, think about what you could have done better,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Take responsibility.
Because those are the parts you can change for the next time. You can't change all those other circumstances, but you can always have at least impact over, if not control over, your own reactions to the stimuli in your head.
Right. So I can actually relate to this idea of not knowing that I'm attractive, or at least not knowing that I'm not ugly. Because
Right.
until about 3 months ago, I genuinely believed I was ugly.
But
And now reflecting back upon that and realizing that I was wrong and I was lying to myself, because I got feedback. It took feedback from multiple friends telling me that I'm not that ugly
right.
for me to realize, wait, where did I spin this narrative and story about myself? And I was so immersed in it. And I wonder if other young men have stories like this about themselves, not just about their appearance, but also their lives, like their personality, their capability, their competence, and so on, their potential.
We are mostly the stories we repeatedly tell ourselves about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be very problematic if you're telling yourself a shitty story. Right? So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that the human brain learns by heuristic algorithms that guesstimate based on statistics. Like a Bayesian algorithm, they essentially take the sample set of times where they were proven wrong and proven right, except for the times they edited out, and then use that to suggest and lean one way or the other, somewhere in the neural pathway. The brain is smart, but it's not actually that smart, because you can end up telling yourself a non-falsifiable theorem about yourself, like, oh, I'm ugly, or oh, girls don't like me, or oh, my dick isn't the right size, or whatever. And you can think whatever you want about it, and you will find enough support for that and ignore all the other evidence against it for as long as you need to. That's the way the brain works. It can trap itself very easily. As the Zen master Takuan once said, I think, it might be a different guy, "Oh mind, it is the mind that fools the mind. Do not be fooled, O mind, by the mind."
Absolutely. And when I think about this, I also think of Dr. K, Alok Kanodia, psychiatrist who actually originally trained as a monk and then decided to go into psychiatry.
Yes.
So he applies a lot of ancient Indian tradition, Vedas and knowledge, as well as combining it with Western modern psychiatry and medicine and understanding. So like he talked about this idea of how cognitive bias is weaponized, or it weaponizes our IQ against us. So actually, the more intelligent you are, the harder it can be to combat cognitive bias, because your logical mind will find all of these reasons and all this evidence to support your assumption. And the
Exactly.
assumption could be something very self-defeating and negative,
Yeah.
like women will never love me and so on.
Exactly. And those are the ones we're talking about defeating out, but it applies also to figuring out whether you're in a cult or not, religiously, nation state, politically, or otherwise. There are many types of delusions that we can self-feed through this process.
So before we dig into that, I want to ask you, what were the key lessons you learned, let's say in your early 30s, once you started to realize, okay, I'm attractive to women? What were the key lessons you learned that then helped you attract Dora, your current wife?
Well, it was actually the main skill set is the lesson that got me to that. And it was in my late 20s figuring out that active listening is a thing and that I was not doing that previously.
So what is active listening and how can I learn it?
I am not the master to teach that. Literally all of my friends around me and half of the people I've dated have all been so skilled at it as to be able to make up for my own lack of emotional communicative awareness at the time, that I would shout out literally all of my friends from the past before me to explain what it is. But it involves listening with your whole brain and your whole heart to what the other person is saying. Not just making sure you're catching layers of communication, but like, how are they? Who else do they bring in the room with them from their memories and their experiences and their embodied trauma and shit? And who isn't in the room? What are the being aware of discourse, being aware of like, you know, what are microaggressions based on people's issues that we might have been dealing with the whole time and making it triggering for them and not knowing it, not by being toxic particularly that day, but just by being guys that weren't actively non-toxic. And in these many, many different ways, slowly breaking down more parts of the oppressive system that actually, in fact, oppresses everybody. Because, let's say it loud for the kids in the back, nobody is free until everyone is.
Right. You can't have half-assed freedom. You can't have half a population free because the other half, it's all part of one ecosystem.
Rights are only privileges unless extended equally to everyone.
Right. So when I think about this, so you began to learn active listening.
Yeah.
How did you
huge.
end up meeting Dora?
We were in grad school. And this is, you know, this is a continuation of that first bit of advice. Train up, get good at stuff, study. Do you know mostly who's in academia? The smartest women of our generation. And they're all getting into really cool shit, some of which is going to save our planet and some of which is going to transform our economies. You know? Get so good at a science, you end up working next to one of them. That's advice, right? That's a good one. Do that. Shit, we need more STEM people anyway.
Yeah, that's a great way. Become highly competent, and of course you will be surrounded by highly competent men and women, and that's a great place to meet amazing life partner.
And don't ignore the liberal arts, the contexts of all of the technological fields and mathematical fields. All of them were invented by natural philosophers, people that studied what we would consider both branches of academia, the liberal arts and the STEM fields. So, like, you know, get you a brain that can do both. Get you a partner that can do both.
Nice.
Even if you don't do it in college.
What drives you to develop yourself so persistently?
You know, when you're a kid, I think you're slowly woken to the reality of what's expected of you as an adult, you know, and what the limitations are of being alive. Can't lay in the street without looking, checking for cars who get run over. As an adult, people have to exchange money for food or they don't get food. You know, all these things you have to slowly warn a kid about before they're ready to, like, go out and adult, right? And at some point, when it was suggested to me the concept that we can't learn everything, I decided to push back on that one. Quietly, in my head, looking for workarounds, looking for ways of meta-understanding that apply across many different fields, and looking for what is it that people who are polymaths themselves learned from being so polydidactyl, so multidisciplinary. And so when I was just like never lower than 87th percentile scoring on all of my test scores as a homeschooled kid, I was reading the original works and trying to like there are concepts in systems theory that I just like developed in my head because it's what's applicable. Phase spaces are actually what you need if you're trying to talk about polydimensional systemic factors that all connect to each other. And this is a way that, you know, you have to be a little bit neurodivergent. You have to have the time and the resources and access to math and logic and stuff. And you have to be allowed the time to doodle. And then later as an adult to come back and learn how to do that stuff in 3D.
And how can I transfer this to romantic relationships and just emotional connection with other human beings? Because I'm sure it's transferable, actually.
I'm not the expert on that shit. I'm just talking about what I got into. The specific type of weird I was identifiable to my partner for a number of reasons. We had some overlap in culture. We had some overlapping values. She had a cousin that's also a little bit neurodivergent, also talks about Legos too much, doesn't know when the conversation topic should shift, you know? She saw me and she's like, oh, I know exactly what type of nerdy intellectual that is. I have one of those in my family, you know? She's Hungarian in part, and I worked at a Hungarian bakery. So I knew, like, a couple words and how to make strudel, you know? And they love, there's like little tiny connections that make us perfect for each other that are,
Right.
we're going to spend our whole lives finding more of them and recounting the ones we've already found. And it's really cute, but I'm not going to bore you guys with that shit. That's not, that's not part of the process. That's like a reward for doing the work.
So I'm seeing an overall picture take form, which is, first of all, you didn't try to force any kind of persona to attract the kind of woman you wanted.
No, fuck no.
Exactly. Instead, you developed naturally into the things you loved anyway that you had an affinity to: math, logic, analysis, systems theory.
But then that led me into computers, and computers led me into 3D modeling and video games and a bunch of stuff that had nothing to do with ever getting attention from girls, but like was
Mm-hmm.
still very fun and rewarding. I think the point is to live a rewarding, worthwhile life that's itself interesting, to
Mm-hmm.
be a whole person yourself. And then you're not going to give off the "I'm incomplete without someone" vibe that is desperation. That it doesn't look good on anybody, no matter what their physique, no matter how good their face is.
Right.
You know?
So it's really about cultivating a healthy attitude and mindset.
Yeah.
What advice could you give to me if I'm like sort of in a place of despair or hopelessness or a place of lack, scarcity? Because it's very hard from that place to actually be a good person on a date or a good boyfriend or a good partner.
You don't have to actually be good. You don't even have to be okay. You just have to do whatever is needed to do better than yesterday. Your only competition is yourself from yesterday, and you want to step it up from where they were. In terms of your own strength, yeah, sure, working out, but mostly your own discipline, your own awareness of yourself, your ability to listen, your ability to be aware of what your emotional state's at and how it's filtering what you're experiencing for you. The better you get, the better your experience will be, because most of your
Mm-hmm.
experience is based on how you're processing.
I want to repeat that actually because I think that's a very important insight. Most of your experience is not what's happening to you, but it's how you're processing what's happening to you,
Yeah, I mean,
which means that you have a lot more influence over that processing apparatus and changing it than you realize.
yeah,
And that if you're saying like I hope better things happen to me, that's the wrong hope. A better hope is I hope I can interpret things and process them in a more productive fashion to live a more meaningful and
that's
fulfilling
right.
life.
That's right. And you can have way more control over that dream than that other one.
Right.
It's not doing work out there. It's doing work in here that lets that happen.
Interesting. So and this comes back to what you said earlier. It's about focusing on the right things. Okay. And Matthew Hussey has also talked about like chasing the right things. He believes in chasing the right things. So what are some of the right things you think we should be chasing in life?
I am glad I got trained in carpentry. I'm glad I got
Mm-hmm.
trained in martial arts. I'm glad I got trained in yoga. And most importantly, I'm glad I got trained in critical thinking. The most high
Mm.
quality women in my life and history have all had the discernment to know to look for a critical thinker, if nothing else. And I don't think I would have passed if I hadn't had at least some original thought of my own. Stuff that was not just a chat GPT algorithm assemblage of other contemporary philosophers, assemblages of other 1700s philosophers, regurgitations of other 1500s philosophers, analyses of Neoplatonic bullshit.
So how can someone who, first of all, what is a critical thinker, and how can someone begin to train themselves on critical thinking?
Again, there are so many people that are better at this than me, and I've had so many amazing teachers, from my mother to some of my best professors to both of my grandmothers. Some of it overlaps with what we used to consider to be common sense and what we now
Mm-hmm.
consider to be advanced media literacy. The ability to sniff out the snake oil salesman from the doctors. The ability to check whether we are being led rhetorically via our emotions or via our logic.
Mm.
The ability to notice when the content balance between showmanship and substance is off. And to have an innate sense for when there's more research that needs to be done on this, or maybe that study was funded by a white supremacist organization, or maybe the statistical model they used was fundamentally flawed. People like to use a convenient set of values and convenient set of samples, don't they? Or maybe the nature of doing an empirical study based on behavioral analysis of large groups is fundamentally flawed unless we're talking about big data like from the internet. And in that sense, then we're still working on huge structural filters that can't really get us a real read on organic human thought, because that's a subset of people that are on the internet right now, which means they have access to the internet and they speak a subset of languages that they have access to that website. No, there's so many filters between us and actually being able to understand anything. You have to stay humble. And I think the biggest obstacle for me in my youth, between me and a lot more potential relationships, was not enough displayed humility. I had it on the inside intellectually for, how much more what we don't know is than what we do know, how much more what we do know is from what I know, and how much bigger what I don't know is from what I do know. The scale of it is, each one of those is logarithmic. But I think it wasn't until I started getting near 40 now that I'm actually starting to manage to show some of the humility that inspires.
And I think humility can also manifest itself as like wonder,
Yeah,
as awe,
wonderment,
as all these positive emotions that
and that's
people.
what fights your hopelessness and despair, man, is curiosity and awe for the amazing world we live in, even the broken parts.
Makes sense. So it sounds like despite your difficulty grasping social subtext and so on early on, it seems like you've done a lot of self-development and work that now helps you have a sort of more finely tuned bullshit meter, which is important for relationships. So my next question for you is just, how can I, if I go on a date or something like that, just notice when my emotions are leading me instead of my reason?
I had this roommate that would play Rainbow Six Siege a bit while we're living together. And, Siege has this pattern of, you approach the enemy, you have to get more and more careful as you get engaged with the enemy, and then, you're in a firefight, right? And for a while, our computers were within earshot of each other, such that I could hear his breathing pattern. And he would always start breathing faster when the enemies are nearby. And it was the same when we played Apex or Valorant. And I'm like, dude, we got to check your breath. Got to be aware of your breath. Because breathing faster like that, starting to hyperventilate yourself, makes it an even more anxious moment than it is. You need to stay calm, keep your mind and your body fluid so that you can react to the situation. Well, rather than freeze up, tense up, get overly twitchy and miss something. This is the same in martial arts or anything else. And so I would say, if you manage to be consistently aware of your metabolism, your heart rate, and your breath, that will help you bring yourself back down when you are already past in an extreme moment of fear, of anger, of sadness, of lethargy, depression. You can breathe yourself back up a little bit, or breathe yourself back down. But also checking where your breathing's at, you'll be amazed how many times, especially in a moment, especially when you don't know how to react, check your breath first. Take a moment for that breathing, and then look more objectively at the moment to where you were in a minute ago.
So use your breath and your breathing pattern as a sort of litmus test. Say like, okay, I'm going to check on my breath and set up a sort of trigger system, right? A cue that says, okay, when I'm feeling a certain way or I feel like something's off, I'm going to check my breath. And
Yes.
maybe that'll give me a clue about a red flag or something my subconscious is noticing
Yeah. Are you
or just some
are
anxiety.
you yourself being really tense right now, and that's what you're being tense about? That's how like
Right.
most people get anxious most of the time. But this anxiety is something you can essentially train yourself out of in most cases.
But can it ever be a valid warning sign?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
trust your instincts.
Okay, so like it's not a matter of ignoring this stuff. It's a matter
Mm-hmm.
of acknowledging it and then letting it pass.
Mm.
I'm anxious. Okay, what am I anxious about? You might have to feel your heart racing and notice, oh, I'm breathing a little fast, to be, oh, why is my heart racing? What am I actually feeling right now? To then be able to say, oh, I'm anxious. And then you can actually like, then you're at the point of self-awareness where you could just communicate that and just be like, oh, geez, I'm really nervous right now. Look at me. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Humanize it, connect, share, be aware. These are the modes that help communicate in general and connect in general. You know, non-awareness of yourself usually is required to have non-awareness of the other person. Because if you're listening to yourself, you can also then start to notice what else is happening in the room. Because you're not constantly strung up on whatever your emotional body, whatever your subconscious body is trying to tell you. You can actually just be clear in the moment.
Interesting. I never thought about self awareness leading into awareness of others.
Yeah, it's connected.
Interesting. Have you ever dated someone who tried to manipulate you, or they were kind of narcissistic, or there was like red flags that you had to learn from?
Oh yeah, totally. Totally. And I learned slowly. But I learned.
Could
Yeah.
you tell one of those stories? Because I think that is one of the fears that can paralyze me in some
Yeah. Yeah,
situations.
okay.
Yeah.
I started dating somebody that I shouldn't have. There were warning signs. I knew she had trauma. But she really wanted me. I really wanted her. It happened after a while, and we talked about, what her history was, everything, and it seemed like she was getting better over time. And then it turned out that she had like lost her job and not told me about it. She was like making up what she was doing with her day and then getting assistance from our folks and then,
Mm.
buying me shit I wanted, even though we didn't have money for her part of the rent and,
Mm-hmm.
doing all this, hiding dishes in the closet because she was afraid that my sister, who we lived with at the time, would find out she wasn't washing her dishes. Like really weird shit, the self-defeating shit. And the answer there was not date that person, tell her to go to therapy. That's correct answer. That's what I should have done, straight up.
Mm-hmm.
But really cute, really wanted her. First person I really was just so physically attracted to, but had to
Mm-hmm.
let it go after a long time because it did not improve and in fact kept getting worse and more manipulative and more weird. Super toxic for both of us, both ways by the end.
Mm.
Yeah, that's my closest to being the abuser in an abusive relationship. And it's to an extent because with the PTSD she had, complete professionally untreated, I mean, that was the only type of relationship she knew to have. Super fucking sad. She's better now, married, kids, everything. We do not talk.
There was a point you made there that was quite insightful. You came close, that was the closest you came to being an abuser. And I think that helps me realize as well that because I grew up with an abusive dad and an abusive mom. They were both abusive in different ways to each other.
Yeah.
And I grew up really curious about abuse and reading books about it and trying to figure out how can I not be abusive when I grow up. because I didn't want to perpetuate that cycle.
I hear you.
And what
My
you
dad was an
described,
abuser, and I have the same karma to deal with.
really, wow.
Yeah, my mom kicked him out early. Didn't have a huge influence on me growing up, but there is still that that desire to drop the generational trauma.
Hmm. Because what it sounds like is if I learn to put up with the wrong things and I let my boundaries be impeded upon repeatedly and I lower my standard for what is good, it kind of can build resentment or bitterness and other things that could potentially lead into outbursts of abuse or aggressiveness or passive aggressiveness,
Yes,
right? Or
and because
manipulation.
if you do a bunch of dehumanization of your own experience, it also is how you internalize that and put that on other people.
Right. And then it just expresses
Just
itself. So in a way, protecting yourself emotionally is also
so,
one of the best ways you can,
prevent yourself being abusive to your friends, yes.
right, and
Because you're more
thus
aware of your shit.
protect the people around you.
Yes.
I see.
And
How
that's
long were
really
you with this
important.
person?
Oh God, probably like maybe counting all the breakups that didn't work, like maybe close to 2 years.
Wow.
Really longer than it should have been.
Hmm. But it sounds like you learned a lot from it, and I'm glad that she had her own journey and
Yeah.
stuff to figure out, and now she's doing better.
Yeah, I only had one other really bad relationship.
That's pretty good if you only had two bad relationships and you learned a lot, and then you found Dora,
Yeah.
and now you're building a great relationship.
Yeah, and I mean, there were other good ones in between all those.
Hmm.
Statistically, still been towards the positive, I guess.
That's awesome. I mean, like you said, the brain can go either way because I can imagine some people in your situation will only think of the worst relationships, and others will tend to think of the better ones.
Yeah.
And that can kind of frame their approach to future dating as well.
Yeah, no, you want
So,
to try to take the good with the bad. Same with the
yeah.
news, you know, you don't want to just do doom scrolling. You want to read up on what's actually positive, read up on tech solutions, read up on indigenous technology solutions to climate change, read up on alternative economic structures like donut economics as a circular economics as an alternative to unsustainable extractive industries. If,
Hmm.
there's this thing I notice, people who don't think anything good is going on, it's usually because they're not looking for it.
Mm.
Yeah.
So again, it comes back to our focus, our attention, our perception
Yeah.
guide our reality
Yes.
and what we see and what we process and how we experience things.
And unfortunately, that also includes like rationalizing a lot of bad setups for ourselves
Mm.
or for our loved ones
Mm.
if we're not aware.
Hmm. So I'm going to an event tomorrow. It's for my brother's birthday. It's in a park. There's going to be a bunch of strangers there.
Cool.
And I've told myself I'm going to talk to as many strangers as I can. As awkward as I feel, as anxious as I feel, I'm just going to go up and say hi. And
Hell
whatever
yeah.
unfolds will unfold. And even if I feel really insecure and scared, or even if things go really bad and I face plant socially, I've decided I'm going to do it.
Face planning socially isn't even that bad. It's a lot like real life face planning. It stings for a second, but you're like back up in no time.
Right. I was diagnosed as a kid with ADHD. I'm still not entirely sure I have it, especially now as I've been learning that diagnoses in the past also used to be withdrawn. They weren't lifelong things. It was like once a diagnosis was not negatively impacting your life or disrupting it, and you were able to function quite well, it doesn't belong there anymore, right? You're
Yeah,
fine.
but that
Like you
doesn't fit.
figured out how
That
to work.
that doesn't fit in the pharma model. The pharma model is
Right.
figure out how much drugs someone can actually manage to do their life on still
Yeah.
that we can charge them for. That's it.
This is going to be a topic for another conversation, but
Yeah.
my God, I have so much to rant about with how like 1 in 7 young boys is medicated for ADHD, that primary school teachers can diagnose ADHD and push parents into
No, we're just supposed to
feeling
work.
coerced.
We're just supposed to play outside more. It's really simple. It's like our school system is based on a Napoleonic military industrial one that should be abandoned in favor of better systems that have been around for decades and centuries, like the Montessori method, straight
Mhm.
up. But yeah, that's a different conversation.
Or Waldorf and schools like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
I
not
understand.
talking to the kids in the in the middle school. We're talking to the kids that came up in a shitty one that stopped teaching you about emotional intelligence when you were in kindergarten. When in fact,
Right.
emotional intelligence is what you need for good relationships as an adult, and it doesn't
Yes.
stop in the 4th grade.
Right.
You
It
know?
never stops.
No, it's something you keep getting better at.
You needed to handle rejection and failure at your
Yes.
workplace, in your family, in
And,
friendships, all
and
sorts of things.
you know, for me, I think the biggest frustration still to the day, and I still deal with it emotionally every day, is how much we each of our internal lives have that we do not never manage to communicate or have experienced by another person. Isn't that sad? That each of us has this whole world going on and all these many different dramas and theories and examples that have unfolded, and most of them are known only to one person.
We don't get to share them.
That
And I
information
think that,
density limit of communication is still real raw for me.
yeah.
I don't
And
know
I
what
do,
type of autism that is, but that's mine. I
no, I
wish I
definitely
could
feel that.
communicate dimensions more with each word.
Or you wish you could literally be telepathically connected to
Yes.
someone you care about and truly experience what they're experiencing and vice
Yes,
versa.
I think that'd be dope.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I recently learned from a friend that, and he's kind of an expert on ADHD. He's been studying it a long time. He's in his 40s and he has ADHD. But he basically explained to me that ADHD people can physically feel rejection. And I was like, huh, what's up with that? And I looked it up, I researched it a bit, and I was like, this is interesting because it turns out people with rejection sensitive dysphoria can be crippled by the anxiety of future rejection, like just the fear of potential future rejection, because it's so painful. Just the anticipation of it can cause them to be paralyzed.
Yeah.
But it can also drive some people to become extremely high performers and high achievers because they don't want to ever experience that pain. So they like overcome it really hard.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that feeling with extreme embarrassment. Embarrassment is usually associated with like a sinking feeling in the stomach or something.
Yeah, or a tight knot. Yeah.
In fact, synesthesia is just the beginning of an idea that really a lot of our emotions are experienced through the body.
So maybe I should change my frame. Hold
Yeah.
on. I should change my frame and go like, wait, all emotions are experienced physically.
Yeah.
It's not a dysphoria. Like, or rather, let me put it this way: dysphoria, which is just a feeling like you don't belong in your body or something's wrong, that's normal
It's
for all
actually
emotions.
it's extra senses that you have that we're taught to ignore in a overly colonized Western patriarchal worldview that only accepts rational thought as the part of the brain that's valid.
Right. But our emotions are part of our mind. They're part of our way of learning and thinking. So learning to
Yeah.
track all of that, our intuition, our emotions, our moods, our senses, our
That'll guarantee help you communicating with women. Holy shit, are you kidding? Because they have more social pressures on them and have been conditioned to have to be more aware of these things, even the autistic ones, straight up.
Hmm. So if I can communicate about my emotions, you think that'll help me connect better with women?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I did notice, by the way, like when you talked about feeling a certain anxiety and then noticing it, acknowledging it, I have noticed that, for example, when I join new Discord voice chats with strangers and things like that, if I just tell them I'm feeling a bit nervous or, hey, I was worried about joining, but I did anyway, and I'm glad I'm here, you guys have been awesome. I've noticed then people, rather than like stepping on me when I'm admitting weakness, they tend to come in and go like, hey, that's okay. We're thank like glad you admitted that,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
might share their own vulnerability. And I realized like, okay, so it connects me to people when I'm honest, even though my initial conception, like people have taught me, don't express your feelings. You're a man. Don't be
Right.
weak.
No, but
Yeah.
this is how you bring the rest of yourself into the room. You log on somewhere, people see a screen name. You say
Right.
something, then they have some type of connection to an experience. And if the experience you share is your actual emotions at the time, that can be incredibly humanizing for everyone. And they tend to drop the facade, especially online where there's no consequences, and just be like, hey, buddy, how are you doing today? You're cool. It's all right. You know, that's every community. I mean, not some online gaming communities, but like that's humans across the board in general. I've never
Yeah.
fallen and scraped my knee open on bicycling through a community of no matter the social, linguistic, or economic background and had people not stop and help me.
Mhm.
That's what humanity
Empathy
is
is
like.
a very strong human sort of underpinning of who
Mm-hmm.
we are, what
Mm-hmm.
we're capable of.
And connecting through that, sharing
Mhm.
your even stuff that's uncomfortable is experience that you're sharing honestly to connect with others through because they've all experienced similar anxieties.
So it sounds like being vulnerable and honest and sharing what I'm actually going through in the moment is also like an act of service because it shows other people very practically that they can drop the facade, they can be themselves,
Yeah,
they can express
it invites
themselves,
them to
and that
share too, if you
and it
do it
makes it
right.
safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. If they see that I'm not being hurt, like nobody's turning on me, then they subconsciously they're like, "Oh, I can do this."
Yeah.
And no one will turn on me. And then it creates a whole new context.
And healthier human spaces where we're allowed to share more of our process is how we all do better communication, no matter our autism.
Right. So I'm realizing this could be something I do exceptionally well. And so maybe this is something young men who are looking to build relationships can learn from is like define one superpower that they really want to master. So for me, it might be something like honest vulnerability to an
See,
extreme, like radical honest vulnerability. That might be something I could be do really well, and that
yeah,
could be my specialty.
yeah,
That could be my sort of bat signal, my beacon, right? That draws people to me.
I like it. Honestly, I think it's a good way to remind people to human.
Hmm. For you, what might you say your? And it's okay if this is a hard question to answer, because
There are no hard questions to answer for me. It's all
yeah,
part of my superpower.
that's part of your superpower. Okay.
Yeah.
Because what I wanted to ask is, what do you think your superpower was in your, say, mid 30s or like early 30s when you were on dates or when you were just around women or in grad school? Like, what might have drawn Dora to you other than your intellectualism? Or just drawn any woman to you, been like attractive to the right kind of woman? Your
Confidence.
superpower.
I was lacking enough awareness to be naturally self-confident because I didn't give a shit for the social context or subtext. So
Mm-hmm.
not giving a shit is a type of cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's has its limits, but coming in with a not ugly face and the confidence to say, "Hi, I'm here to do blah. I actually know how to do blah. In fact, they're paying me to be here to do blah." Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it can be toxic for a young man to get overly indulgent and start relying on his few things he's good at. But on the flip side, if you're not arrogant, if you're not overconfident, but you just actually know how to be useful and share something really cool, like for me it was capoeira or breakdancing or stilt walking, and for other people it could be a language or a unique type of craft,
Mm-hmm.
you know? There is all most types of authority are pretty toxic. But one type of authority I'll let pass most moments in my life is the authority of actually knowing how to get something done the easiest, best way possible. That is a type of authority I love it when they step in. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
feel like an asshole stepping up when I know how to deal with something the best. It's the temporary, situational authority of having the best skill set for the immediate task. I think all other authority is bullshit and should be abandoned, and that's the only type that we should really respect. And that is the only type of confidence that also doesn't come with some type of icky egoisticness for me, you know?
Right, because I've always abhorred authority.
Yeah.
I've always abhorred this idea of like leading by telling people what to do.
Oh
I
my
would much
God.
rather lead.
Sounds wrong, right?
Yeah, I'd rather lead by doing what I think is best, and if people think it's a good idea, they can do it too.
That's called
Like they
leading
can
by
modify it.
example. And it is
Yeah,
pretty healthy.
and what you said is even better because it's sort of the authority of competence. It's the authority of I know what to do in this situation, so I'll do it. And then after this situation, you might know what's best. So
Yeah.
you take the lead. You take the reins. So it's not about holding on to power. It's about using it as a tool to accomplish
One
what you need to
thing
accomplish right now.
for women who are subject to a great deal more social pressures than men under a patriarchy are looking for people that aren't going to wield power in a villainous fashion. It's probably the number one request if we're thinking about it. Let's be real. So seeing
Right.
how you act when you are the one who has authority or has the power in the situation is going to be something I think smart women would be checking for. I probably would be if I was one, right?
And I think it's something men should check for in women too, which is just how do they treat the people to whom they have no obligation
Yeah,
to treat well.
that's a classic. Absolutely.
Right.
You know?
And so, in the same way, if a person is given power, how do they use it? Do they start to get power hungry? Like, are they status driven? Are they now stepping on others? Are they not
Do
admitting
they
their
start acting
mistakes?
entitled really suspiciously fast? You know, this could give you clues
Right,
about later.
right.
Yeah.
Whereas if they are humble with it, if they're willing to give it up to someone who may wield it better, if they're willing to
Share it.
distribute it a little bit,
Yeah.
allocate it,
Yeah.
like if they give credit to others they worked with who helped them rather
Yeah.
than trying to hoard all the credit, and so on.
Like Confucius says, he who honors his teacher honors himself.
Hmm. So I think young men can learn a lot of these values. I can learn a lot of them, but it may feel a little hard to start getting that first step,
Mm.
right?
Uh, I don't want to just be like martial arts is the answer. I probably just watched way too much anime, you know? In
Mhm.
fact, there's my t-shirt for the interview,
Nice.
but
Which anime is that from?
this is a reference to both Avatar: The Last Airbender and Cowboy Bebop.
Nice.
Yeah, no, but I think that having a high amount of personal discipline and awareness of your physical and emotional state is a good way to get started being a less toxic person and being more and more aware of every other aspect of your personality that you could make more functional and truer to your vision of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I may have had ADHD. I was never taken to a shrink about it. But if I got better, it was because I had something to focus my energy on. I just did ass load of push-ups, sit-ups, and cartwheels until I got really good at flips and kicks and stuff. And by the time I was also starting to become basically aware of my physical and emotional state.
Mm.
So maybe it is like an anime, and you just need to have a little training sequence, and you build yourself up to the point that when you experience hardship, you push through it because you know you can. Start trusting in yourself. Now there's whole two.
That's so interesting. For me, it's always felt like the thing that's driven me is people believing in me before I believed in myself, and then me empathizing with that belief enough to do the thing that they believed in me being able to do, and then my belief goes up as I see results. And
Yeah,
I'm like,
that's
wait, I
that's
can
not going to
actually do
work for everybody. I never got acknowledged like that. I would if I was waiting for somebody to see me, I'd still be waiting wherever I was to start with. Shit.
it.
I had
Yeah.
to work up to where I was happy where I was. And then my
Mm.
partner saw that and said, okay, yeah, he's skilled in things I like.
Lovely. Okay, so my last question for you is when you met Dora, what were the most appealing, deep qualities and values you saw in her that you valued?
She has the self-awareness of somebody that's been meditating the whole time. She hasn't been meditating the whole time.
Wow.
I'm going to get really sappy if I think about this for too long, but my partner is absolutely brilliant intellect with analytical capacities equivalent to those of anybody I've studied under. And, the only reason I haven't been treated like an equal by her this whole time is because the patriarchy has consistently told her she's less than what she is. And part of my role as her partner is creating spaces for her to work through that programming and rise up to how I see her. Strong as hell.
Mm-hmm. Capable as hell.
Yeah.
How did her self-awareness manifest itself to you?
Well, she was the one that kept our conversation really meta. When we started farting, she talked about it. When she needed the conversation to cover topics or cover things differently, she talked about it. When, rather than just experiencing, we're experiencing and talking about the experience together.
I love that.
Our partnership is essentially like a single person doing meditation all the time.
I love that so much because I've often felt guilty for talking about a situation because so many people have expressed this idea that talking about a situation somehow ruins the experience. but I find it enhances it if done right.
Yeah,
And it sounds like Dora was very good at doing that right.
she is. Yeah, it doesn't feel like work. It's easier than get going really philosophical and meta and silly with her at the same time while making language puns is easier than like maintaining a regular conversation with anybody else. For me,
That's awesome.
this is part of the
Yeah.
reason why we got married, is because our communication was just the results of great work without feeling like work at all.
So the results of great play.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm
Yeah.
so happy for you, man.
Thank
That's
you.
amazing.
Thank you. I'm happy to get to share if any of that's useful. I doubt it. I mean, I'm a pretty weird and specific guy, but actually, so are all of us. So, who fucking knows?
I think it'll help a lot of people. I know because it's helped me, because I'm realizing anybody can do that. Anybody can develop any of these traits. Like, so if anyone grabs onto one of these things and they're like, I want that, I want to be that or build that, they can.
Yeah.
So if they're like, yeah, because for me now, I'll probably have more confidence in my next conversation with someone to talk about the meta and not worry about, am I ruining the flow or something?
Right. I mean, there's room for both.
Mm-hmm.
And
There is.
you got to be you, and you got to bring all of yourself into the room. Even if it's just feeling like, hi, I'm new in this chat room. That's the start of humaning together.
It is.
All right.
Thanks, Ty. It was great having you on.
Thanks a lot, Vamsi. Always fun.